Supercar first aired on British television in January 1961.
I'll give you a rundown on the situation.
Set in the present day, the show followed the adventures of a revolutionary new vehicle that could travel on land, underwater, through the air, and even into space.
We call it Supercar.
The professor here took 5 years to build that.
From their desert laboratory at Black Rock, Nevada, the Supercar team, consisting of test pilot Mike Mercury and scientists Professor Popkiss and Dr. Beaker, worked to improve and develop this remarkable machine.
What better way to test out the supercar than by rescuing those kids from the sea?
In the first episode of the series, Supercar comes to the rescue of pilot Bill Gibson, his younger brother Jimmy, and pet monkey Mitch after their plane crashes at sea. Bill then repays this kind act by apparently handing all responsibility for Jimmy and Mitch over to the Supercar team and promptly scarpering.
There goes a charming guy.
Over the course of 39 episodes, Supercar would be put through her paces on everything from missions of mercy to assisting in various experiments and secret projects, and even helping the authorities apprehend all manner of dastardly villains.
Master Spy, what are you doing here?
Among the worst of these villains are the Supercar team's archenemy Master Spy and his sidekick Zarin, who are always looking to make an easy profit or to capture Supercar for themselves.
Master Spy! Do not do that!
Following the completion of production on Four Feather Falls, the AP Films team had very little work on the horizon, beyond producing 4 commercials and a travel film featuring Nicholas Parsons.
Hello.
Fortunately, the company was saved from disaster thanks to the arrangement of a meeting with ITC head Lou Grade, at which Anderson pitched the idea for Supercar. After some tense negotiation, Grade finally gave Anderson a commission for 26 25-minute episodes.
You are about to see the latest epic from Supercar Studios in Black Rock.
This first meeting marked the beginning of an association between Anderson and Grade that would last right up until the end of production on Space 1999 in December 1976. And it all started with Supercar.
Action!
The Supercar concept was actually an amalgamation of 2 ideas, one from Gerry Anderson and one from Four Feather Falls writer Hugh Woodhouse. Anderson's idea included the central vehicle of Supercar, her brave test pilot, and his kid sidekick, while Woodhouse's focused on the adventures of eccentric scientist Dr. Beaker using his considerable intellect to thwart various criminal schemes.
Satisfactory. Most satisfactory.
With these 2 concepts combined, the new series would in theory appeal to the whole family. Children would be drawn to the exciting adventures of Mike Mercury and Supercar, and adults could appreciate Dr. Beaker's bumbling approach to fighting crime. The skill with which these 2 ideas were intertwined can perhaps be best seen in the hugely entertaining relationship between Mike Mercury and Beaker, with the heroic Mike soon developing a weary acceptance of the fact that Beaker usually finds trouble wherever he goes.
You mean they collect heads? Human heads?
Only for ornament.
The voice cast for Supercar would be a mix of newcomers to the Anderson fold and some who had worked for him previously. David Graham, the only member of the Four Feather Falls cast who would return for Supercar, voiced Dr. Beaker.
Perhaps we can have a little service around here.
Master Spy's snivelling sidekick Zarin. Bill Gibson.
Be prepared, that's my motto.
And Mitch the monkey.
Oh, come now. Oh, you're just saying that.
For which he spent a day studying the primates at London Zoo.
You just stand there and keep very quiet and you might not get hurt.
George Marcel, who had played the villain Diamond in Anderson's recent B-movie Crossroads to Crime, would provide the voices of Professor Popkiss.
Sounds a good idea.
And the sinister Master Spy.
Well, friend Zarin, and what do you think of that?
Oh, hey, I almost forgot to give you this.
Mike Mercury himself would be voiced by Canadian actor Graydon Gould, whose performance perfectly captured the character's combination of square-jawed heroism
Here I go!
and wry bemusement at the antics of Dr. Beaker.
The things I do for you, Doc.
The final member of the Supercar cast was to be dialogue director Sylvia Tam as the voice of Jimmy Gibson.
I don't know that I like the sound of all this.
Although uncredited for her performance on the first season, her name would only become more prominent from this point on following her marriage to Gerry early in the show's production. Sylvia Anderson would also voice all the show's female guest characters, including Dr. Beaker's occasionally seen cousin, Felicity, who was essentially Dr. Beaker in drag.
Coffee time!
Other recurring characters in the first season included Harper, a disgruntled office worker turned criminal,
Never got anywhere. No initiative, they said.
and his partner Ben Judd,
I'm a skilled hand at the muffled explosion.
a Cockney safecracker who bore a strong resemblance to a later and much more famous Supermarionation character.
Yeah, well, they're welcome to it.
Supercar itself was the first in a long line of star vehicles for Anderson's Supermarionation heroes, and was created in direct response to his belief that the puppets never looked especially convincing while walking.
My feet!
However, putting them at the controls of a snazzy machine not only solved that problem, but also added a new element of excitement to the programs.
Ready to take off.
And Supercar also introduced another very familiar feature of future Anderson productions, the launch sequence.
Full boost vertical.
A second season of 13 more episodes soon entered production, but with some noticeable changes.
Have you nothing to say about that?
George Mersell was unable to return for the new episodes, so instead, Cyril Shapps would step in to voice Professor Popkiss
My goodness, I'm so excited I can't wait for the show to begin.
and Master Spy.
Thank you very much.
Also not returning for the second season were Martin and Hugh Woodhouse, who had written most of the scripts for the first season. However, their departure was not by choice, as the Andersons decided to write all the second season scripts themselves without even consulting the Woodhouse brothers.
Curious. Most curious.
Although still highly entertaining children's television, the scripts written by the Andersons for the second season of Supercar were more firmly pitched at a young audience than those of the first, and incorporated increasingly outlandish elements. These included mad scientists with shrinking potions,
This situation is gonna take some getting out of.
drum-playing apes talking to each other in beatnik-style slang, and even aliens from a distant planet who can enter the dreams of sleeping human beings whenever they feel like it.
Yes, it is magic.
Two new and rather unnecessary additions to the cast came in the form of runaway French orphan Zizi
Pretty cute, too.
and Professor Popkiss's sister, Aunt Heidi, who appeared to be a walking advertisement for the dangers of drug abuse. However, Supercar's second season did bring one contribution to the Gerry Anderson universe that would soon become legendary, as the words "filmed in Supermarionation" made their debut on the show's end credits.
Nice work.
Supercar was a ratings smash and a merchandising success, but following completion of its 39 episodes, the future of the series was unclear.
It's getting late, Mike. Surely it's time they called in.
Over the next few months, even as pre-production on Fireball XL5 was getting underway, rumours continued to persist that Supercar would be continuing, perhaps under a new title.
Poppycock! I beg your pardon. I said poppycock!
Sadly, Mike Mercury and the Supercar team would not be returning for any more adventures, although some elements from the series did find their way into later productions.
What?
Barry Gray's incidental music for Supercar would be heard in Anderson shows right up until the first season of Space 1999, nearly 15 years later.
There's no getting away with this one, Paul.
Supercar's canopy would be fitted to the submarine Hepcat for the Stingray episode Raptures of the Deep, while the Black Rock Laboratory itself made a final and rather poignant appearance at the start of every single episode of Thunderbirds.
Now who's a fool?
While it may appear somewhat primitive compared to those later productions, Supercar laid the groundwork for the string of successful Supermarionation series that followed over the next few years.
Good show.
Having refined their puppetry technique to a reasonably impressive standard during Four Feather Falls, the AP Films team now began to incorporate model effects to further support their storytelling, and they weren't afraid to tackle ambitious ideas that stretched their skills still further. Over the course of its 39 episodes, Supercar introduced to the Anderson universe such crucial ideas as placing aquariums in front of models to create the illusion of being underwater, exciting high-tech vehicles and locations, and even those all-important explosions. As a series in its own right, however, Supercar can still stand tall and proud alongside the shows that came after it.
Absolutely lunatic. But, rather fun.
The series excelled in the quality of its characters and the quality of its writing, which understood the importance of treating young minds with the respect they deserve.
Boy, what a team! You and Supercar!
Back in 1961, Supercar really was the marvel of the age, and its very best episodes were never anything less than
Most satisfactory, man.
Fireball XL5 first aired in 1962 and was the second series to carry the words "filmed in Supermarionation."
Okay, Venus?
Okay, Steve.
Right. Let's go.
Set 100 years into the future, the series would continue to develop the traditional Anderson formats and tropes that had begun with Supercar.
That's right.
Across 39 action-packed episodes, the heroic Colonel Steve Zodiac of the World Space Patrol took the controls of Fireball XL5, one of a fleet of XL rocket ships based at Space City.
Don't you think you should take the Professor and Venus on this mission?
Steve's crew consisted of the scientific genius Professor Matthew Mattick, the beautiful Doctor of Space Medicine, Venus,
I gather by the compliment, Steve, you want something to eat.
and robotic co-pilot Robert. In charge of Space City itself was the lovably cantankerous Commander Zero,
This is World Space Patrol headquarters, not a circus!
with his eager assistant Lieutenant 90 often finding himself used as a sounding board for Zero's frustrations.
But sir! There you go again!
While Scottish Chief Engineer Jock Campbell was responsible for keeping the XL fleet running smoothly.
Leave it to me.
Also along for the ride, usually causing trouble wherever he went, was Venus's pet Lazoon, Zuni. Tasked with keeping the peace in Sector 25 while also occasionally going where no man had gone before, the Fireball XL5 crew regularly faced such villains as the Subterranes of Planet 4-6,
The vengeance of the Subterranes has begun.
and Boris and Griselda, aka Mr. and Mrs. Space Spy.
Steve Zodiac is coming.
Zodiac!
Other memorable horrors lurking out in space included granitoid tanks, plant men, space monsters, and further terrors both large and small. The heroic tones of Steve Zodiac were provided by actor Paul Maxwell, who would later be heard and seen in other Anderson productions.
I can't let that call go unanswered.
David Graham returned once again, this time playing Professor Mattick, Lieutenant 90, and Zuni.
I'm glad about that.
While John Bluthal, in his only association with any Anderson production, provided the voices of Commander Zero and Jock.
Is that an order, Commander? No, Jock, just a suggestion.
Sylvia Anderson was to take the roles of Venus, Commander Zero's wife Eleanor, and their son Jonathan,
I wish Mom hadn't gone away.
Yeah, you can say that again.
while Gerry Anderson himself voiced Robert the Robot and all the show's other robots using an artificial larynx.
Robots of the jury, how do you find the prisoners?
Fireball XL5 saw the AP Films team drastically expand the scope of their storytelling, from the contemporary, everyday world of Supercar to the almost limitless possibilities of outer space.
Wonderful sight.
And the production team rose to the challenge expertly. The puppet department were now producing human characters that were slightly easier on the eye than some of those seen in Supercar. Well, most of the time anyway.
Shut up.
Yeah, shut up.
While the show's sci-fi setting also allowed them the chance to create a varied mix of strange alien life forms.
What do you say to that, pink people?
On the model front, we moved from the lone desert laboratory of Black Rock and only occasional guest vehicle of Supercar to the bustling and futuristic Space City, plus a whole universe full of exciting new vehicles. The Fireball XL5 launch sequence, which opened every single episode, proved to be one of the most memorable parts of the show, even if the series never did answer the question on every young fan's mind: who has to go and rescue that trolley after every launch?
Oh, this is getting monotonous.
Fireball XL5 began airing just as the space race was beginning to heat up, and found favour with an audience whose imaginations had been fired by the seemingly very real possibility that mankind could be living on the moon in just a few short years.
Well, it's no use daydreaming about it, lad. We've got work to do.
The AP Films team embraced that expectation and ran with it, to the extent that human beings in Fireball XL5 are perfectly able to survive and even speak in the vacuum of space, provided they've remembered to take their oxygen pills before stepping out.
Take this. It's an oxygen pill. It'll enable you to live in space.
Fireball XL5 ran for just one season, and several of the final episodes to be produced featured the on-screen destruction of its star vehicle and major location models.
I'm afraid it couldn't be saved, Venus. I'm sorry.
It seemed that the AP Films team were anxious to be finished with the series and on to the next project.
Oh, what do you know about that?
However, eagle-eyed viewers of the next Anderson series, Stingray, might just spot Commander Zero, while Steve Zodiac himself played the self-absorbed movie star Johnny Swoonara in the episode Stand By for Action.
I don't have to put up with this. It's not in my contract.
Despite the often questionable science, and some even more questionable sexism,
they may have electronic dishwashers, but women? They haven't changed one bit since the 1960s.
The success of Fireball XL5 helped to cement the reputation of AP Films as a production company that was going places, culminating in Lou Grade's eventual purchase of the company from the Andersons.
Millions and millions of dollars for us!
The show also holds the unique distinction of being the only Anderson series to be networked in the United States.
It can only mean one thing.
While his other shows aired in syndication despite all efforts to get a network deal, Fireball XL5 aired in NBC's Saturday morning schedules from 1963 to 1965.
And if you can arrange for the Earth to be invaded while we're on the air, we'd sure appreciate it.
By this time, Fireball XL5 was already a lucrative merchandising success, with a variety of books, toys and games based on the series still highly sought after even today.
Your Fireball is very impressive.
And Don Spencer's classic end title song proving to be one of the most enduring elements of the show.
It sure is a cool number.
When the classic TV Century 21 comic was first published in 1965, Fireball XL5 fans had new weekly adventures to enjoy, with the show's characters now able to do things their puppet counterparts would never be able to achieve, and this time in full colour. Sadly, the fact that Fireball XL5 the television series was produced in black and white is almost certainly the reason it hasn't enjoyed as much repeat exposure over the years as the colour series that came after it.
No, Robert, it's no need to get all steamed up.
While its characters can seem more than a little dim at times, even for a children's show,
We're making no progress at all.
and their would-be trendy dialogue makes them sound more like inhabitants of the 1950s than the 2060s,
Gee, I'm sorry. I'm a tootie.
Real force, Venus!
the show still has all the same elements of action and excitement that made the likes of Stingray and Thunderbirds so successful.
I think the programs are of an amazingly high standard.
And it still has the ability to entertain a child audience if they can get to see it. More importantly, Fireball XL5 established a successful format that many subsequent series would develop still further, with almost weekly alien threats to Earth being repelled by operatives of a world security organization and their amazing vehicles.
I guess I know now why they call you the greatest astronaut on Space Patrol.
I think you're cute too.
Fireball XL5 may at times seem like a forgotten series, but its legacy would cast a long shadow over the next decade of Gerry Anderson's output.
We are about to launch Stingray.
Stingray was launched in 1964 and was the very first Gerry Anderson television series to be made in colour. Even more impressively, the show also holds the distinction of being the very first British television series ever to be filmed entirely in colour, although the majority of contemporary viewers would still be watching it in black and white.
Let's get started. There's no time to lose.
The series, the third to carry the words filmed in Supermarionation, focused on the operatives of the World Aquanaut Security Patrol, and in particular the crew of the Stingray submarine.
Tower from Stingray. Are we clear to leave Marineville?
Clear to go, Stingray.
While investigating the destruction of a Wasp patrol vessel by an undersea alien race, Captain Troy Tempest and his hydrophone operator, Lieutenant Phones Sheridan, are captured and brought before Titan,
Leader of the underwater city of Titanica.
Following a tense trial by fish, the two men are sentenced to life imprisonment in the underwater city of Aquatraz, but escape thanks to the help of Titan's mute slave, Marina.
One move and you're dead.
The trio return to their base at Marineville, where Marina is officially welcomed aboard as the newest member of the Stingray crew.
Well, I certainly know what I'm up against.
Across 39 episodes, the Stingray crew would face a variety of underwater threats.
Whole races of people living under the sea.
Some bad, and I guess some good.
Some to help, some to fight.
Meanwhile, the evil Titan and his hordes, including his surface agent X20, are always plotting new and ever more spectacular schemes to destroy Troy Tempest and capture Stingray.
My plan cannot fail.
Despite essentially being a more polished and full-colour take on the Fireball XL5 concept, albeit with the star vehicle transferred from outer space to under the sea, Stingray built upon the success of its predecessor in several noticeable areas, including perhaps the finest musical score Barry Gray ever composed for a Gerry Anderson series, much of which would be frequently reused across the next decade of his various shows. AP Films had now relocated from their Ipswich Road studio to a larger site on Slough's Stirling Road, which enabled them to film 2 episodes at once, featuring larger scale sets and even more impressive model effect sequences.
Just look at that!
The series wasted no time in letting viewers know that they were in for 25 minutes of non-stop action and excitement, in one of the most impressive opening title sequences ever seen on television. Returning to provide guest voices for the series was David Graham.
Who are you?
Professor Graham!
Graham?
With Sylvia Anderson also occasionally providing a voice or two.
You see, I can speak. In a way.
But the remaining Stingray cast members were entirely new to the Supermarionation universe.
Oh, come off it. I'll bet that thing's been out of service for years.
Canadian actor Don Mason provided the voice of the heroic Captain Troy Tempest.
Fire Sting missile, and don't miss this time!
Whose facial features were modelled on those of actor James Garner.
Being governor of a state sounds like a big, fat bundle of US dollars.
Robert Easton would provide the voices of Phones.
It's okay, Captain. I'm wide awake.
And Agent X20.
Marina and the Stingray crew are doomed.
While Lois Maxwell, the then Miss Moneypenny of the James Bond films, would play Marineville Control Tower operative Lieutenant Atlanta Shaw.
Troy, you'll be killed!
The voices of Atlanta's father, Commander Sam Shaw.
Tell Lieutenant Fisher to get back here, too.
Her colleague, Lieutenant John Fisher.
You'll never believe this, but it's Titan on our radio.
And the evil Titan himself were all provided by Australian actor Ray Barrett.
Perfect. It could not be better.
Who often found himself being called upon by friends of his children to reenact Commander Shaw's immortal opening line,
"Stand by for action."
One Stingray character would of course require no voice actor.
It's Marina! I knew it!
Although a source of amusement to certain male members of the audience, and a few of the show's guest characters,
A silent woman, huh? That's even better.
Marina's silence provided the puppeteers with the unique challenge of creating a character's personality through movement alone.
So you really do like your new home, Marina?
This was helped by the decision to sculpt alternative heads for several of the main characters, featuring expressions of anger or happiness, in order to bring them to life even more. And, in Marina's case, having the end title song dedicated to her every single week probably helped increase her appeal as well.
Why can't you whisper the words that my heart is longing to hear?
Another interesting character touch came with Commander Shaw, who had been permanently confined to a hover wheelchair following an incident at sea. Although almost certainly done as a way to cut down on the number of puppets that would have to be seen walking, Commander Shaw still deserves to be recognised as one of the very first disabled characters on children's television.
Emergency! Battle stations!
Power plant, battle stations.
Much like those seen in Fireball XL5, the alien races encountered by the Stingray crew generally included, and indeed totaled, just 2 men, or 3 if things were really serious.
You will begin the invasion by destroying the west coast of the United States of America.
However, these characters once again gave the puppet department the chance to let their imaginations run riot.
Yes, it's crazy. Crazy enough to succeed.
Surprisingly, for a series set largely at sea, the Stingray models would usually only come into contact with water during scenes that featured the craft on the ocean's surface. For underwater scenes, an aquarium filled with fish, bubbles, and other floating detritus would be placed in front of the model stage, and Stingray moved on wires behind it, while a fan would also be blown onto the set to suggest the movement of the water. This technique had first been used in Supercar, but Stingray would utilise the process to more frequent and far greater effect. Stingray would be the most successful series AP Films had yet produced, both with audiences and merchandisers, and was the star strip when the classic TV Century 21 comic first launched in 1965.
How did you find out? Well, I read it in the newspaper. Brilliant!
But by this time, Stingray was already in dry dock, and the team were hard at work on their next series, which promised to be even bigger and more spectacular than anything else they had produced so far.
Thunderbirds are go.
In the 55 years since its first broadcast, Stingray has enjoyed frequent repeat runs and home video releases.
Gee, that's great.
Although a little overshadowed by Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet, each episode offers up an enthralling mix of action and adventure that more often than not fully lives up to the promise of its opening titles.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
Despite this new breakneck pace, the show also found time to explore its characters more than previous Anderson series. Everything from the backstory of Commander Shaw's injury, to the hapless X-20's frequent desperate attempts to carry out Titan's latest evil plan,
Why must Titan always give me the impossible tasks?
and Troy's romantic entanglements with Marina and Atlanta.
Women.
From script to screen, Stingray was a showcase for everything the AP Films team had achieved so far.
This will always be a great moment.
Although AP Films' greatest success was just around the corner, Stingray presented an imaginative concept that continues to inspire and entertain to this day, and will always remain one of the most creative and popular Gerry Anderson series.
Well, folks, this is where we came in.
Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons first aired in 1967 and was the 5th series to be made in Supermarionation. Following the phenomenal success of Thunderbirds was always going to be a challenge, but Captain Scarlet proved to be almost as popular as its predecessor and has remained so over the last 50 years.
I'm glad to hear it. Go on.
The series, the first to be made under the Century 21 Productions name, follows the exploits of Captain Scarlet, the #1 agent of a world security organization called Spectrum. After a disastrous mission to Mars in which fellow agent Captain Black destroys an alien city,
They're obviously hostile. Okay, Lieutenant, let them have it.
the invisible beings known as the Mysterons declare war on Earth and announce that their first target for retaliation Captain Scarlet and Brown race to protect him but are killed en route and reconstructed by the Mysterons using their special ability to recreate the exact likeness of an object or person known as retrometabolism. The Mysteron Captain Brown fails in his attempt to kill the President, who is then kidnapped by Scarlet and taken to the top of the London Car View. In the ensuing shootout with Captain Blue, Scarlet falls 800 feet to his death. But miraculously recovers from his fatal injuries and is no longer under Mysteron control.
It would seem that this Captain Scarlet is now indestructible.
His body too now possesses the ability of retrometabolism, enabling him to return to duty and become Spectrum's greatest asset in the fight against the Mysterons.
It's great to be back.
But Captain Scarlet wasn't alone in this fight.
Yes, sir, Captain Blue.
SIG, Captain Scarlet.
He was usually partnered with Captain Blue, with regular support from Captains Ochre,
Spectrum is green.
Grey,
SIG,
and Magenta.
Yes, sir, Colonel, sir.
While on Spectrum's aerial headquarters Cloud Base, operations were supervised by the no-nonsense Colonel White.
Initiative should never clash with discipline.
And communications controller Lieutenant Green.
Angels 1, 2, and 3. Immediate launch.
In most episodes, though, Spectrum's first line of defense was the Angels, a group of 5 female fighter pilots: Destiny, Harmony, Symphony, Rhapsody, and Melody, who along with Lieutenant Green was the first regular black character in an Anderson series.
Proceed to Cloud Base.
SIG.
And the Angel Interceptor itself was just one of the many memorable vehicles that Spectrum had at their disposal.
Splendid. Tell me more.
Other aircraft included the Spectrum passenger jet and Spectrum helicopter, but it was the ground vehicles that proved the most popular, especially among merchandisers. The flame red Spectrum saloon car, the rarely seen maximum security vehicle, and everyone's favourite, the Spectrum pursuit vehicle. The SPV was an armoured tank that, much like Scarlet himself, appeared to be virtually indestructible. Inside the SPV, the driver sat in a rear-facing seat designed to reduce injuries in the event of a crash, an idea that seemed to make perfect sense to Anderson at the time, but caused nothing but confusion for the viewers.
We started to write in explanations in the scripts, but then, of course, I realised that not everybody would see that episode. If we put it in, say, 5 times, it would become boring, and if we only put it in once, a lot of people wouldn't know. And it was something I totally regretted doing.
The series continued Anderson's march towards live action by introducing more lifelike puppets, with heads scaled in correct proportion to their bodies for the very first time, but with the greater realism also came a reduction in mobility and expression if this lifelike illusion was to be maintained.
Help! Help!
In another notable departure from what had gone before, the tone of the series was exceptionally dark for a family show, with guest characters being ruthlessly killed off in almost every episode in order to be reborn as agents of the Mysterons, and often being defeated just as violently. The darker tone is firmly set at the start of every episode, as the chilling voice of the Mysterons lays out this week's evil plan, before we see Captain Black standing alone in a graveyard, the former Spectrum agent now just a zombie firmly under the control of the alien intelligence he once tried to destroy.
I have come to pass on your instructions from the Mysterons.
Despite these major changes, some things remained reliably consistent. The special effects sequences from Derek Medding's model department became even more spectacular, and Barry Gray once again provided a phenomenal musical score for the series that perfectly spotlighted both the heroic exploits of Spectrum and the sinister activities of the Mysterons. The end titles theme on the first 14 episodes was largely instrumental, with real-life pop group The Spectrum stepping in to provide a memorable theme song for the final 18.
They crash him, and his body may burn. They smash him, but they know he'll return to live again.
But perhaps even more memorable than the song was the 7-note staccato drum beat used for scene transitions.
What the?
Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons ran for just one season of 32 action-packed episodes, each running just 25 minutes, yet was a critical and merchandising success both in its time and in subsequent decades. Books, comics and toys based on the series were all immensely popular, and the show enjoyed high-profile repeat runs on the BBC in the early 1990s and early 2000s.
And because of this, I am convinced of our ultimate victory against the Mysterons.
The continued interest in the series even led to Anderson creating a CGI reimagining of the show, which launched on ITV in 2005 as New Captain Scarlet. Despite falling victim to poor scheduling, New Captain Scarlet retained the memorable characters and dark tone that has continued to make the original series so popular, while the CGI production enabled New Captain Scarlet to do things that wouldn't have been possible for his puppet counterpart. But with the original Captain Scarlet celebrating his 50th anniversary in 2017, with a slew of new merchandise including brand new high-definition transfers of all 32 episodes being released on Blu-ray, it's clear that the Supermarionation series that started it all will live on in the hearts and minds of both the public and fans alike for many more years to come.
On behalf of everyone, all I can say is, thank you, Captain.
Joe 90 first aired in 1968 and was the 6th series to be made in Supermarionation.
You know what to do. Just relax.
The show centred around 9-year-old Joe McClane, whose father, Professor Ian McClane, had created a machine called the Big Rat.
The Big Rat? The brain, impulse, galvanoscope, record and transfer.
The Big Rat was capable of recording a human brain pattern onto magnetic tape and then transferring all of that captured knowledge and experience to another person.
Oh, Mac, it's incredible, just incredible.
After demonstrating the machine to Sam Loover, Professor McClane is surprised to discover that his friend is really an agent of the World Intelligence Network, and WIN Chief Shane Weston is very interested in purchasing the machine.
Will somebody please explain to me how this crazy scheme's supposed to work?
Since the Big Rat was originally tested on Joe, and Professor McClane has only a minimal interest in his son's well-being,
don't come crying to me if you get hurt.
He will now become the World Intelligence Network's latest and most special agent, Joe 90. Each week, the brain pattern of a top specialist will be recorded without their consent and transferred to Joe, enabling him to carry out a variety of dangerous missions in order to preserve world peace.
Smashing!
After the large number of characters that had made up the casts of both Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, Joe 90 would initially seem a much smaller series by comparison.
That's the way we like it, Sam.
Joe and his father didn't live in a top-secret base, but rather a nice cosy cottage on the Cornish coast, albeit one with a hidden lab in the basement. And although several episodes of the show would include memorable guest vehicles, the only two we regularly saw were Professor McClane's jet air car and Sam Loover's car.
Car? What car?
While this was certainly a departure from what had gone before, and gave merchandisers fewer potential toys to market based on the show, the series made up for its lack of cool hardware by being one of the most character-driven Anderson productions ever made. Joe himself was to be voiced by 16-year-old Len Jones, and was the first little boy of the Supermarionation universe not to be voiced by a woman. But perhaps surprisingly, the real stars of the show were the 3 adult leads. Rupert Davies, best known to television audiences as Maigret, gave a standout performance as Professor McClane, Joe's loving but often conflicted father.
I don't mind telling you, I had my doubts about letting Joe work for World Intelligence.
You certainly did, Mac.
While Supermarionation regulars Keith Alexander and David Healy took on the roles of Sam Loover and the wisecracking WIN chief Shane Weston, respectively.
It took a big rat to catch a big rat. Get it?
Yes, Chief. Very clever.
Good.
Although the series centred around the exploits of a 9-year-old boy, some of its very best scenes focused on these 3 characters, and the occasional conflict between them regarding Joe's newfound career as a secret agent.
Are you accusing us of sending Joe on a highly dangerous assignment without your permission?
The thought had crossed my mind.
I suggest you two cut it out.
The show would be filmed using the same correctly proportioned puppets that had been designed for its predecessor, Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, with the puppet builders and sculptors once again refining their technique still further when it came to producing an even smaller puppet than usual to play Joe himself.
Sweet boy.
And considering that the star of the show was a 9-year-old boy, viewers might have expected the series to include less of the violence and death that had been a regular feature of Captain Scarlet.
Take aim. Fire!
But instead, Joe 90 embraced murder and carnage on a scale that even Captain Black would have admired.
This is Captain Black, relaying instructions from the Mysterons. You know what you must do.
Over here, Coletti.
While modern audiences might find the idea of essentially brainwashing a 9-year-old orphan boy and then sending him out on highly dangerous kill-or-be-killed missions to be a little suspect, it's only with hindsight that the show's methods and morals become problematic.
Huh, forget it, amigo.
Contemporary viewers found almost nothing to complain about, with children taking to Joe's amazing adventures just as they had those of his predecessors, provided they were lucky enough to live in a region that was showing the series.
Good evening.
No!
Joe 90 ran for one season of 30 exciting episodes, and was a modest success despite receiving relatively limited exposure compared to Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet.
Great, Joe. Just great.
The usual flurry of toys, novels and comics accompanied the series, but not quite as many as normal, and this is perhaps due to the show's lack of memorable female characters.
Blast.
Thunderbirds had Lady Penelope.
FAB.
Captain Scarlet had the Angels.
SIG.
And Joe 90 had Mrs. Harris the Housekeeper.
Will you and Joe be in for lunch?
For a production team that had obviously recognised the importance of creating a series that appealed to boys and girls alike, the boys-only feel of Joe 90 is somewhat surprising, and may have been another contributing factor in the show not quite having the same mass appeal as those that went before it.
And what did they do before we had Big Rat and Joe? Just answer me that.
Despite this, the series has managed to remain in the public consciousness, bolstered by home video releases and occasional repeat screenings.
That's good news.
Although often overshadowed by its Supermarionation predecessors, Joe 90 contains all the superb technical and production qualities that made Thunderbirds and the rest such a success, at perhaps the very highest levels Century 21 ever reached.
That's strong talk, Wesson. I'm ready to back it up with action.
Some of the very best puppetry and model effect sequences the team ever produced are in this series, coupled with another superb musical score from Barry Gray and some standout characterizations. Having a child as the show's main star has caused many to wrongly dismiss the show as being the most kid-friendly Supermarionation series.
Bunch of amateurs.
But those who are willing to give it a chance have discovered it to be one of the most mature and sophisticated of the bunch.
I sensed an inner integrity, and events proved me right.
Its recent high-definition Blu-ray release has given the series the new lease of life it has long deserved.
It's terrific!
And proven that 50 years on from its first screening, Joe 90 still has much to offer fans old and young.
I second that. Joe 90, our most special agent.
The Secret Services saw the Gerry Anderson Productionsies take a great tumblings of whoops bang you for lollipad. Oh, folly made mis. The Secret Service was the 7th and final television series, so far, to carry the words filmed in Supermarionation, and maintained the Supermarionation universe's focus on the world of international espionage, as previously seen in Joe 90.
Yes? Go on.
Continue.
First airing in 1969, you could be forgiven for having never heard of it, since it only aired in a handful of regions in the UK, received extremely limited international exposure, and has never been repeated since the 1970s.
Good morning. The name is Unwin.
The series centred around the exploits of Father Stanley Unwin, a country vicar who led a double life as a secret agent.
He appears to be an unlikely candidate for espionage work. However, we shall see.
After inheriting a revolutionary shrinking device, the Minimizer, from his late friend Professor Humbert, Father Unwin is recruited by British intelligence for a top-secret project known as Bishop.
British Intelligence Service Headquarters. Operation Priest.
Unwin has also been assigned an undercover intelligence agent named Matthew Harding, who now works as the vicarage gardener. But whenever the bishop issues them a mission from his office in Whitehall, Father Unwin and Matthew put aside their pastoral business and spring into action.
I've just heard from the bishop. A mission, Father? An urgent one.
Often to the confusion of their housekeeper, Mrs. Appleby.
Going out? He's only just come in.
And the bishop's assistant, Agent Blake.
Something has happened to Captain Scarlet.
For most assignments, Matthew is shrunk to 1/3 normal size by the Minimizer and then conceals himself inside Unwin's gadget-laden case, which then accompanies the father as he sets out for their destination in his prized 1917 Model T Ford, Gabriel. Since no respectable villain would ever suspect a seemingly ordinary parish priest of being a threat...
Who is that? Just some stupid clergyman.
Colonel White!
Father Unwin and the miniature Matthew are able to bamboozle the opposition with ease, as they take on all manner of sabotage and skullduggery in the heart of England. Everything from dastardly enemy agents spying on generals at the local golf course, to suspicious goings-on at a health clinic,
Oh, me miserum.
and even a spot of railway-related robbery.
It will require a very unorthodox approach.
And whenever things look particularly hopeless, Father Unwin has one more weapon in his formidable arsenal that's guaranteed to flummox the enemy. His own brand of nonsense language, known as Unwinese.
All that true words, speed of your pencil must deceive my eyeball.
I didn't quite catch that, sir.
The Secret Service was born as the result of a chance meeting between well-known comedy performer Stanley Unwin and Gerry Anderson, when they crossed paths at Pinewood Studios during production of Anderson's 1968 feature film, Doppelganger.
Most remarkable.
Having long admired Unwin for his many television and film appearances in which he showed off his particular brand of nonsense speech,
Each man's investing mode, and that was the future's late for his own gale. And so that's what I drove for it, and therefore that's all I've asked.
Anderson was very keen to include him in his next Supermarionation production, and set to work devising a concept that could best utilise the Unwinese he was most known for, despite some misgivings among many of his Century 21 Productions team about the wisdom of basing an entire series around a performer whose style wasn't to everyone's tastes.
And he's supposed to be from intelligence.
However, Anderson pressed on, and, determined to make the best use of his new show's star, while also avoiding the old problem of having to make his puppets walk, decided that Unwin could also perform all his characters' walking and driving shots for real.
Oh, how clever.
This also allowed for the opportunity to have the puppet of the shrunken Matthew interacting with the real world without the need to keep building expensive new sets. However, while this may have seemed a good idea on paper, in practice the constant switching from puppets to live action and back again seemed to serve only as a distraction that added little to the overall production beyond the mild glamour of English country location filming.
Hey! What's going on?
Unlike previous Supermarionation series, the Secret Service was to be largely grounded in the contemporary world of 1969, albeit with the occasional high-tech aircraft or vehicle if the script required it.
Noisy.
Exhilarating.
The scaling back of the traditional Anderson format that had begun with Joe 90 reached its apex with the Secret Service, with our heroes foregoing any cool supersonic vehicles in favour of pootling to their destination in Gabriel.
They don't build cars like Gabriel today.
With the only gadgets at their disposal being the Minimizer itself and the hearing aids with which Unwin and Matthew kept in touch during missions.
I wish you wouldn't inform me of the handy deal, Matthew, and folly for your eyeball.
even one of the most celebrated visual elements of the Gerry Anderson universe, Derek Medding's model effects department, took something of a back seat here, thanks to the smaller number of guest vehicles and action sequences featured in the scripts. After the obvious mass audience appeal of Stingray, Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet, it's difficult to watch the Secret Service without constantly asking yourself one very important question.
What's going on?
No. Who exactly was a series about the adventures of an elderly puppet priest supposed to be aimed at?
Pigeons!
This question was certainly reflected in the show's very limited range of merchandising, and was also to help seal the fate of the Secret Service much earlier than the Century 21 team would have been expecting.
All terrible and disastrous, Craven.
Yes, I know.
Originally planned as a 26-episode series, the Secret Service came to an end after only 13, following a disastrous first screening for ITC head Lou Grade.
I know him. One of the old school.
Believing that American audiences would never understand the Unwinese, while overlooking the fact that that was entirely the point, Grade told Anderson to cancel the series and make the switch from Supermarionation to live action.
What a chance did we stand?
While Anderson had been waiting for this moment for many years, and had already begun working on the concept that would soon become UFO, the end of the Secret Service also meant the end of Supermarionation at the Century 21 studios.
Well, there's only one thing to do.
While the model department got to work on the new live-action series, the puppeteers, some of whom had been with the company for over 10 years, would be laid off at the beginning of 1969.
A very painful situation.
The Supermarionation era had come to an end. Today, 50 years on from its first screening, the Secret Service is still often described as the show that killed Supermarionation.
Oh dear. Dear me.
While this isn't entirely accurate, since the Supermarionation shows were by the end of the 1960s becoming increasingly expensive to make and just as hard to sell, the bizarre format and baffling execution of the Secret Service certainly didn't help matters.
Maybe this wasn't such a good idea.
However, for viewers who have discovered the series on video and DVD in the decades since its premature cancellation, this sometimes awkward hybrid of puppetry and live action is an unfairly overlooked celebration of the Supermarionation era's greatest achievements. The series maintains the gentle humour and strong characterizations of Joe 90,
at last, he's got a parachute,
accompanied by a few exciting special effects sequences and a surprisingly moral core that harkens back to the good old days of Thunderbirds.
I believe every man is entitled to at least one mistake, but he should try to learn from his mistake and be a better man.
Despite not being to everyone's tastes, the Secret Service remains a charming curiosity that serves as a gentle and enjoyable coda to Gerry Anderson's Supermarionation era.